Hey YouTube, Jam here. Welcome back to the gaming station. So, normally I like to do balance change videos after finishing the meta series. Normally I like to go through the list, find what brawlers appeared on multiple lists, and then say those brawlers need a nerf. But there's one problem doing that this time with this meta. The three strongest brawlers are not that common in my list, those brawlers being Gale, Surge, and Mr. P. Gale was in 3 of my list, Mr. P was in 2, and Surge didn't make the cut for any of them. I knew when making the list that Surge was strong. He was top 10 in win rates for every mode except for Hot Zone and Heist, but his use rates weren't high enough for the list, so he never made the cut. I know the way that I do the list has its flaws, and this is one of them. There's no real way for me to tell for new brawlers and higher rarity brawlers what their strength is in a mode when they're only being used by top ladder players and pay-to-play players. I'm not saying the lists are wrong, they're just not 100% accurate, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm going over all this to say that I'm not going to talk about nerfs today, as many people already talk about that if you go on Twitter and Reddit. It would just be beating a dead horse, and it's pretty obvious the meta is very one-sided to those brawlers mentioned before. As you can tell from the title and thumbnail, I'm going to be going over brawlers that I think need a buff. So, I had a few brawlers in mind, but to get a better feel for the topic, I went over to Brawl Stats, looked at the bottom tiers for win rates, and then picked brawlers from that as well. I'm not going to go over numbers in this video just to save time, but I did write down how many modes the brawlers were in the bottom 10 of win rates, so I'll mention that. We're also going to be focusing on just 3v3 modes, since getting into showdown win rates can get pretty messy. Also, I'm not going to include Shelly in this list, as I personally don't think the devs want her to be strong in the game, for fear that she'll destroy lower tier ladder. It's not a mentality that I personally agree with, but it's the one I think they have, since she's been pretty bad for a while and they haven't touched her at all. Also, I made a video about what I think they should do with her a while back, and all the things I said in that video about buffing her, I still stand by. Alright, with that long-winded intro out of the way, let's get into the video. So, the first brawler I want to go over is Colt. I'm going to mention him early in the video because I don't feel like Colt is terrible in this meta, and I think a small buff is all he needs to be improved. Right now, Colt is in the bottom 10 for win rates in 4 out of 6 modes. I think Colt is fine in terms of damage output, with his normal attack, his super, and his gadget that lets him reload 2 shots instantly. I wouldn't want to see a damage buff for him. I think that a small HP buff could go a long way. Giving him a few more interactions that he can survive by 1 shot would help him find a spot in the meta, maybe even competing with Surge for a mid-range DPS brawler. Also, in the past, I said that I would like to see a projectile speed buff for him as well. I know that people think that it would lower his skill cap and they don't agree with it, but I think that's one of the big problems with Colt, is his skill cap is just so high. You can just play Brock and get more consistent damage for a little less effort. So, I'm still a fan of giving him this buff, even if they just try it for a month and then revert it if it goes bad. Okay, so the next brawler I want to talk about is the poster boy for being over-nerfed. I'm talking about Leon, of course. Right now, Leon is sitting with Colt being bottom tier in 4 modes. One of those modes, according to the win rates, is Brawl Ball, which I'm a little surprised about because generally, faster brawlers do very well in Brawl Ball. Now, this might just be a bad meta for Leon. He did get a pretty decent buff the last round of balance changes, so I'm totally fine with saying that I might be a little early calling for another buff for him. And honestly, I'm not totally sure how they should fix Leon if he does need another buff. I feel like he does enough damage, as if he gets close, he can pretty much take out any brawler other than tanks, of course. Maybe a small HP buff would do okay for him, since you want to get close with him and try to take brawlers out quickly, and that means he's going to take damage naturally. Another idea is maybe giving his super 1 more second of duration. That would help him get up the map and take a good spot to hide and maybe take an aggro position. I'd also like to see him get something like a smoke bomb that can make his team invisible for a short time, or a stun mine he can place in choke points for his second gadget. I feel like those would fit his ninja assassin theme pretty well, and it would give him more utility when he plays in a team. Now, being totally unbiased with this brawler, B is bad in 3 out of the 6 modes. Those modes being Siege, Bounty, and Gem Grab. Siege I get, there's not a lot of good maps for her, and she doesn't have a ton of HP to hold her lane for very long before she needs to back off and regen health. But Bounty and Gem Grabs are modes she should be decent in. So, as much as I hate to say it, she needs a buff. I have 2 ideas that I think could help her in Gem Grab and Bounty, and I don't think that they would make her overpowered. The first thing is a small range buff. This could make her overshadow Piper and Gem Grab, but I don't think it would really affect their Bounty pick rates too much. I think this change could help B find a good spot in Gem Grab as a mid, and it could help her land more shots in Bounty and possibly get more kills too. The other idea I had was another projectile speed buff. She did just get one of these a few months ago, but I think another one would help her. If I'm not mistaken, she has the slowest projectile out of all 3 snipers, and I don't think it's a coincidence she also has the lowest win rate out of the 3. However, this change I am a little unsure about, as landing 1 shot with B gives you a reward of triple damage on your next shot. So, making it too easy to land her shots can be a dangerous thing. if they do make this change, I think they should nerf her supercharged shot damage, as that would help balance that out a little bit. Okay, on to my second to last brawler, and this is the one that gave me the idea to do this video in the first place. 8-Bit is, in my opinion, one of the worst brawlers in 3v3 modes, and he's currently in the bottom for 3 of the modes. It's not the worst that we talked about, but these are all modes that I feel like 8-Bit should be good in, being Siege, Bounty, and Gem Grab. Modes you don't need to move a lot in, and you just need to hold your lane. The first idea I had for 8-Bit is an HP buff. The biggest problem I have with 8-Bit is the fact that he is so slow it's very hard to dodge with him. Giving him a small HP buff could help him hold his lane and win his 1v1s. Also, dying as 8-Bit is a huge penalty because he's so slow and it takes him so long to get back into his lane. This could help balance that out just a little bit. Another idea I had for 8-Bit is giving him a movement speed buff, but I wouldn't want to add it to his base kit as that kind of goes against the theme of the brawler. I would prefer it to be reworked into one of his star powers, something like Frank's Power Grab or Mortis's Creepy Harvest, where if 8-Bit gets a kill, he gets a temporary speed buff, and then getting more kills refreshes that buff. This would make winning your lane extremely rewarding for 8-Bit, and make it much more viable for you to move over and help pinch an opponent in the next lane without worrying about losing your position entirely on the way back. And now we're on to the last brawler for this video. According to the win rates on Brawl Stats, Crow is the worst brawler across all modes, coming in the bottom 10 of all 6 3v3 modes. I'm not kidding, every 3v3 mode he's ranked in the bottom. One of my first videos was covering a Reddit topic about how Crow needed a buff and what could be done to fix him in 3v3 modes. The idea I liked from that was he needed a damage buff and an HP buff. The reason I say he needs a damage buff is because he needs to be able to secure kills a little bit faster. Right now, most of Crow's damage comes from his poison, and while that makes him a unique brawler, it takes a very long time for him to get kills. I think that he needs to have a little more damage up front so he can get his kills a little faster, and then if opponents are forced to back off, that's when the poison chip damage can shine. To compensate for this, I think they would have to nerf the poison damage as well, but I think Crow doing a little more damage with his daggers will help him a lot more in the long run. And I think Crow needs an HP buff because Crow's super puts him in a terrible spot more often than not. He jumps in, maybe he gets his kill, but he almost always goes down while trying to back out. He has a great super that doesn't really fit his kit since he never really wants to take an aggro position because he has super low HP. I think if they buffed his HP by a few hundred points, he would be able to take a little more advantage of his great super, and this would make his kit make a little more sense. And I know he has a shield gadget that's very strong, and that kinda helps with this problem, but they nerfed it so you only get 2 uses in a game, which isn't great for 3v3 modes. This gadget needs to be rebalanced as well, but I'll save some time by not going into that. Alright, so those are 5 brawlers that I think need buffs in the next round of balance changes. Colt, Leon, and Bea just need small buffs, as I don't think they're horrible in this meta, and they just need to be pulled back to the pack a little bit. I do think 8-Bit needs a decent sized buff, as he's very hard to play and he struggles in modes he should be good in. I really like the idea of reworking his star powers to give him a speed buff after a kill, and I think that would make his play a little more rewarding. And Crow needs a pretty big overhaul in my opinion. He's a super fun brawler to play, but he struggles due to most of his damage coming over time, and his kit doesn't really work well together because of his low HP and his aggro super. But, like always, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my ideas. I love hearing your guys' opinions on balancing of brawlers, and if you have a brawler that I didn't talk about, comment on that as well. But that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.